Hello, homeschool moms. Today we're going to be looking at 9 things that I think are important to consider before choosing homeschool curriculum. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Janelle Knutson. I am a homeschooling mom to 7 children that range in age from adult down to toddler. This is my 14th year homeschooling, and along the way, I have made a lot of mistakes when it comes to choosing curriculum, and I want to kind of share with you some things that I have learned that hopefully will help you to make a better decision when it comes to choosing curriculum. The first 2 things that a lot of people will encourage you to do when it comes to choosing homeschool curriculum is, number 1, to consider your philosophy of education, or another way of thinking of that is just the method of education that you think is best. And the second one is to consider your child's learning style. Now, these are they are important and they are good things to consider, but I don't think they are the most important. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. Before I get to the 2 important things that I think are the most important, let's go ahead and look at that philosophy of education and your child's learning style and talk about why those are still good things to consider. When it comes to the philosophy of education, you're basically thinking through what method of educating your child you think is going to be the best for your child or your family, whether that's classical education or Charlotte Mason or whatever. There's a lot of different methods of education or philosophies of education out there, but determining which one lines up better for you and your family is going to be helpful. Classical education is pretty rigorous. If you are a more hands-on, learn through exploration type of person and you purchase a classical education based curriculum, you're going to be overwhelmed, you're going to be frustrated, and you're not going to enjoy homeschooling. You're going to say, this doesn't fit our family, and it's going to be a waste of your money. So it is a good thing to consider your method of education. The other thing I mentioned was your child's learning style. And again, this is an important thing to consider. If your child is more an auditory learner, or they're more hands-on learner, or they're a more visual learner, these things are good things to consider because it means that your child is going to be learning the information in a way that fits the way they learn information, and it's going to make the curriculum and the homeschool day a little bit more enjoyable for them. But like I said, I don't think these are the 2 most important things. Let me share with you what I think is the most important and why. The 2 most important things, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is number 1, whether you can implement the curriculum, and number 2, if you can afford the curriculum. Because here's the thing. When I started off homeschooling, I chose curriculum based on whether or not it met my philosophy of education and my child's learning style, and that was pretty much it. The challenge for me was I could not always implement that curriculum into our homeschool day. It was great curriculum. I loved the curriculum. It fit my kids. It fit me, but I could not implement it. Maybe for whatever reason, I didn't have the time, I didn't have the energy or whatever to actually teach that curriculum to my child. And so what happened was either that curriculum sat on the shelf and never got used, which then doesn't matter how good it is. If it doesn't get used, it's doing nobody any good. Or I would use it and it would overwhelm me and burn me out because it was so difficult to implement. And so I just encourage you that first and foremost to make sure you're finding a curriculum that you can implement. And this is going to vary from season to season, from year to year in your homeschooling journey. There is curriculum that I was able to implement 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 14 years ago that I'm not able to implement now. There are things that I'm able to implement now that I might not have been able to implement in the past or in the future. So make sure that you find a curriculum for the coming school year that you can actually implement, because it ain't doing anybody good if it just sits on the shelf or it burns you out. The second thing here that I think is really important is whether or not you can afford the curriculum. Let's be honest, there's a lot of great curriculum out there, but it can get expensive. And so if you are stressing about finances because you purchased a curriculum that you really couldn't afford, and now you're stressed about finances the rest of the school year, that curriculum really isn't benefiting you. It's actually adding stress to your life, and it would have been better to go with a different curriculum, probably that was a little bit less expensive and more affordable. And remember that any curriculum that you get, even free curriculum that maybe you get from the library or somebody just loans you, you can tweak it and change it to make it fit more of your philosophy of education or more of your child's learning style. So you can change curriculum a little bit that you have and use what you have or use what fits into your budget. That being said, I think that the education of our children is really important, and that means it's valuable, and I think that we should budget accordingly for our children's education. For my husband and I, one of the things that we do is we set aside money from each paycheck that he gets that set aside for our homeschool budget, so that when it comes time to purchase school supplies and school curriculum, we already have that money set aside, and then I can purchase curriculum that is within our budget. But we budget for it, and we budget probably more than a lot of people would because we really put a high value on our children's education. It's not the thing that we value most in our kids, but we do think that it's important. Now, some years our budget is more than others. So last school year, I was overwhelmed, and I knew that this coming school year we were going to need to use video curriculum for our kids, just because I needed something that was super simple for me to implement. That meant we knew that our budget needed to be bigger, so we had to cut other expenses in other areas last year so that we would have a bigger budget when it came time to purchase our curriculum for this school year that we're in right now. So that's just some things to consider. So I've shared 4 things so far that I think you should take into consideration before choosing homeschool curriculum. And now I want to share with you 5 more things. If you have more than one child, then you're going to want to consider whether you want your children to be working individually, or if you are going to come together for some subjects and teach them all of one subject together. Things like history and science. You could group kids together and teach them one lesson, and then they could do assignments at their own level. And so that's something that you want to consider, because there are curriculum out there that are more, grade level based and fit better with each child learning individually on their own. And there is different curriculum that is meant for kind of group or family learning. Another thing to consider is whether or not you have the time or you even enjoy lesson planning, or if you would prefer a curriculum that's more open and go. There is some curriculum that takes some prep work on your part and some planning and lesson planning on your part. Other curriculum, you literally open that thing up in the morning and you just go through what they tell you to do, and it's very laid out for you. And so if you are looking at curriculum and you're absolutely loving a particular curriculum, but you do not like lesson planning and it requires a lot of lesson planning on your part, I'm going to almost guarantee that you're going to get frustrated with the curriculum pretty quickly, because you either don't have the time or enjoy lesson planning, and it's something that you have to do to implement that curriculum. On the other hand, if you purchase a curriculum that's very open and go, yet you like lesson planning and you like the flexibility of changing things up and doing things differently, that curriculum might bog you down and you might feel kind of chained to it because it's very hard to change because it's very laid out and very structured. Another thing that you're going to want to consider is whether or not you're okay using secular curriculum, or if you prefer all of your curriculum be Christian curriculum from a biblical worldview. And this might vary from subject to subject too, but it's definitely something to consider. Do you want the math curriculum to have a Christian worldview, to be from a Christian publisher, or are you okay with it being secular? What about the history curriculum? What about the science curriculum? So just think through those things to make sure that the curriculum that you're purchasing is in line with the goals and, the things that you want for your child. If you want your child to learn math from a biblical worldview, then you're going to want to make sure that the math curriculum that you're purchasing is not only written by a Christian, but that incorporates a biblical worldview into it. If that doesn't matter to you when it comes to math, then obviously you have more options to consider. So, just keep that in mind, whether or not you're okay using secular curriculum, or if you want everything to be Christian. And even then, with Christian curriculum, do you want it just written by a Christian, or do you actually want it to have a Christian worldview where it's presenting things from a biblical worldview? All right, the 8th thing that I think is really good to consider is your goals for your child and for your family. This is really important too, because if you are wanting your child to have a rigorous academic education, then you are going to need to choose curriculum that provides a rigorous academic education. Your friend might be using a curriculum and she might absolutely love it, but it doesn't provide that rigorous academic education that you want. And so you need to consider the goals that you have for your child. If you want to travel, if your family is wanting to homeschool because you want time to travel, then you're going to want to take that into consideration when you're looking at curriculum. You probably want to purchase curriculum that's going to take up a very minimal amount of space if you're traveling, curriculum that's really easy to take on the road, and that kind of thing. If the goals that you have for homeschooling are more about discipleship and training, the heart of your child and the mind of your child with a biblical worldview, then you're going to want to make sure that you have curriculum that comes from a biblical worldview and has your child think critically about the things going on around them. Maybe you want a rigorous academic education and you want, discipleship is a focus, and you're also planning on traveling. Again, that's wonderful, but make sure you're taking all those into consideration. The last thing that you want to do is want to travel and then you purchase curriculum that, you get these huge boxes in the mail and you think, where would we ever store this when we're traveling? How are we actually going to implement this when we're traveling? So think about the goals that you have for your family and then choose curriculum accordingly. And then finally, the last thing that I encourage you to think about before you choose homeschool curriculum is whether you want structure or freedom. There are some seasons in my homeschooling journey that we have needed structure. We have just needed a very structured routine, structured curriculum, and so I've needed to make sure that I find curriculum that's going to provide structure. There's other seasons where we want freedom. We want to be able just to learn through experience and getting out and doing things, and a lot of times that might mean that we do more of a maybe topic-based curriculum where we just pick something that we're interested in and we learn about that and we tie in science and history and math and all of that into something that we are interested in and that we want to go visit at the museum or take a field trip to. So consider whether or not this coming school year your family needs structure or more freedom. What do they need? What do you need as the mom? That's the most important thing sometimes, is just what do we need? Because we need to be able to implement it. But think about structure, freedom. Which one do you need this coming school year? And then choose curriculum wisely, because there's some curriculum that's going to provide a lot of structure but little freedom, some curriculum that's going to provide you a ton of freedom but absolutely no structure. So just something else to consider. Hopefully these 9 things will help you as you consider what curriculum you're going to choose for your family in this next school year. I'd love to hear from you. What things do you take into consideration and that do you think are important when you are choosing homeschool curriculum? Leave those in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again really soon in another video. Bye-bye.